Well, hello again, everybody. This is John Norris at Trading Perspectives. As always, we have our good friend Sam Clement. Sam, say hello.
John, how are you doing?
Sam, I'm doing very well. I think I'm doing very well, but I'm not really sure.
Why is that?
Well, it's the economy. I just don't think it's humming along all that well, like most Americans. However, the government is telling us things look pretty sweet.
There does seem to be this disconnect, and maybe it's getting better, maybe it's not, but for a while, really I'd say since 2022, it's been this kind of no one feels that great, and the data really, there's points and there's weakness in areas, and if you're in commercial real estate, you probably haven't had fun and things like that, but all in all, but all in all, things really aren't that bad. We've had positive economic growth most quarters, and the ones we haven't have had some wonky trade deficits with it. And overall, the economy's doing pretty well. Inflation is coming down in terms of how they measure it.
In terms of how they measure it.
In terms of how they measure it.
Yeah.
But people still seem to be largely dissatisfied.
Well, and there has to be a reason for it. Either the American consumer and its dissatisfaction of economic activity or their perceived lifestyles, either they're wrong, or basically the Bureau of Economic Analysis and the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the government, if you will, it's wrong. Which one is it?
I think it's both.
We
may be trading perspectives a little bit, but I do think consumers do not. I don't think it lines. I don't think it's fair how pessimistic a lot of consumers are. I do think inflation is still there, but I do think it is legitimately lots of areas we're not experiencing it anymore. I think overall, I think it's going back to the fact that people are anchored to old prices that I think is the biggest problem with people being pessimistic. Eggs used to be $1.50 and now they're $3, and they're not.
A dozen eggs.
Exactly, and I think with how quickly things have changed. I mean, that's a couple years ago that we're still anchoring prices to, which is getting kind of far away. But it's also people are still anchored. People are still anchored to mortgage rates and what have you at 2.75%, 3.5% where you could afford houses. And things have changed, but things have also changed with wages too.
Well, I would tell you, wages perhaps more on that in a second, but I would tell you a huge chunk of the problem is, it's as you sort of alluded to, the way the government calculates inflation, because they focus on the so-called core, ex food and energy, to try to see whether or not prices are systemically higher throughout the entire economy. The problem with it is when people make their monthly budget, they're not budgeting in, I'm going to buy a new television every month. I'm going to buy a new computer every month. Or I'm going to buy a new appliance, I'm going to buy a new car. These are things which are more sort of one-off purchases. And most of the bills that I have are kind of set. Obviously utilities aren't, but my mortgage is set. My property tax, it might go up. That's a once of a year type thing. Once we get it reset at the beginning of the year, my insurance doesn't change.
Yeah.
These types of things are not these wildly fluctuating things month in and month out. Now, don't get me wrong, my most recent car insurance price hike was a stunner, not in a good way. However, those things which we have to buy literally week in and week out don't seem to be improving terribly much. So if I'm sitting there and let's say I've got a mortgage, I've lived in my house for 5 years, my mortgage rate hadn't changed. It hasn't changed. However, regardless of what the government has to say in the CPI or the PCE deflator, that aspect, which is a huge chunk of my budget, hasn't changed. But when I go to the Publix or the Kroger, the Albertsons, the Giant, wherever you go, you're grocery shopping, Wegmans, wherever you go, that has changed.
Do you feel like it's still going up though?
I know it's still going up.
See, I don't feel that as much anymore.
You're a lot thinner than I am, so I'm buying more food.
I have accepted, I guess, these higher prices, and I guess they are going up, and it's that kind of shock of, okay, I used to spend $100, now I'm spending $170 or whatever at the store. But to me, it hasn't felt like it's changed as much of late.
Well, I will grant you, it has not changed as much as rapidly as it was, maybe this time last year. However, I'm still a little bit bamboozled. It could be just used to previous prices, what have you. Just things just up all over the place, and it's just fixing dinner for the two of us at night is just a pretty expensive proposition.
Sure. Yeah.
And last week when I was driving down to Auburn for John's graduation, I filled up the tank outside of Alexander City, and we're using premium in the new car. And I'm like, shoot, man, about 17 gallons, and it was like we're paying over $70 because that's gone up to over $4. So these things that are fluctuating, the so-called core things or the X-core things, X food and energy, still seem to be going up in price. I mean, just little things. It's still difficult. You might be right. You might be right in the fact that I'm still used to the old prices. Mm-hmm. But when you go buy a 20-ounce Diet Mountain Dew, which is something which Sam Clement probably has never done.
Mm-hmm.
However, I do it with some regularity. It's $2.79. Which is it's significantly higher. So when these things are remaining high, not coming down, and you're paying more, go to the McDonald's, go to the sort of your low end sort of comfort, creature comforts, or just sort of, hey, this is a little treat. When your little treats and your lower end treats, your lower end living, when that stuff's still going up after, even if it is a little bit more slowly than it was, mm-hmm. It still feels to the U.S. consumer like, I'm getting screwed.
Why do you think gas takes up so much of people's brain power when they talk about this?
Because it's something that people don't want to buy.
Yes, and it is the percent people spend on gas as a percent of their budget is way off the highs still. I mean, it's I think 7% on average. It used to be closer to 15%, but that's the thing people talk about more than anything. Do you see gas prices are $3.40 a gallon, $3.50 a gallon? There's no part of that equation that's talked about more than.
Well, I think one is people don't like buying it. I mean, I've kind of laughingly told Beth, just like, how do I even know I'm buying it? I don't see it go in.
Yeah. As long as your car keeps running.
Teasing.
You can kind of hear it.
Yeah, sort of. But it fluctuates. The reason why why the government doesn't want to consider in the inflation numbers is because it can fluctuate pretty wildly. Mm-hmm. Hey man, could you see
and
it?
Things out of their control.
Yeah, I mean, it's without a doubt. It's just kind of like, hey man, did you see that the premium at the Shell in Mountain Brook Village is $2.75? And then it's $4 a week later. It's just like, and so that's one of those things. People generally buy, a lot of people, I would say maybe most, more than half, probably buy a tank of gas a week.
Yeah.
And so that's something that you see week in and week out. The grocery store is something that you see week in and week out. Utility bill comes once a month. The insurance bill comes once every 6 months. Mm-hmm. That type of stuff. It's those things which you purchase more frequently that you see the price vagaries or variances. That is going to impact you far more strongly or harshly in just sort of short-term perceptions.
Sure. The last thing for me, or not the last thing, but it seems like, again, these comparisons that people are using and painting in broad brushes of prices a few years ago to prices now, not a single one of those people complaining about it will talk about their wage differences from a few years ago to now. And I think that just gets into a human issue. We want to complain about the things and not point out the positives, but wage growth has been pretty strong. I mean, people, I wonder just how much people like to complain and how much stuff being on social media. I saw old price tag comparisons. You peeled off the current one that was on top and you saw the old one below of something at Home Depot that had tripled in price. But that old price was 3 years ago. I mean, at what point do you just move on with where prices are now? They're not coming down, and they shouldn't come down, and I hope they don't come down, because if they come down, a lot of people are losing their jobs.
Well, you're right about that, and I'll tell you, welcome to adulthood. That's just the way old people like to respond. I still run across people who say, I remember back when I could get a CD for 12%.
Yep.
I remember my first mortgage was 14%. Mm-hmm. I mean, shoot, I remember the first time I bought a 2-year note in Baltimore at 3 7/8. I felt like, who in the hell is going to lend money to the federal government for less than 4%? But then we did it for 15 years.
Yeah.
And so people have a tendency to remember what they want to remember. How many times have you talked to someone, I block out the bad stuff? I can sit there and tell, I remember going to Treadwell Sellers barbershop, in Mount Brook Village and buying a Sprite in a 12 ounce or 10 or 12 ounce green insulated bottle with the dimples on it, you know what I'm talking about, it's 15 cents. And now all of a sudden I'm talking about, Mountain Dews for $2.79. But I'm not waxing nostalgic on that. But I do think that disconnect for people is the fact that a 12 pack of Coca-Cola is now $12 or whatever it is. Beer is more expensive. I mean, it is. And it's just those types of things which people will consume on a weekly basis, they have gone higher and they remain higher. The Big Mac meal has gone up and it's going to continue to go up. And so bread, used to be buy a loaf of Nature's Own honey wheat, $2.49. It's now $3.79. That type of stuff. None of these things individually is going to kill your budget, but you notice them because you purchase them more frequently.
Right.
And that's the reason why I think people believe that. But then also, I would tell you, apart from the grocery store, apart from going to the pump, apart from having to deal with your insurance company, and again, that was a crippler. Have I told you that my car insurance went up?
Yeah, mine did too.
Yeah. So I would also tell you that the way we consume social media and the way we just see media in general is apt to put us in a negative frame of mind.
100%.
And so, no one's going to click on man saves, cat from tree. Okay, fine, whatever. People tend to consume negative news. And my goodness, if you take a look at everything out there, the news is just negative across the board. And you can't even get away from sort of political leanings, even in places like the Associated Press, which I go to most days. Even some of their so-called, unbiased reporting seems to be mighty biased. And then you obviously even talk about places like CNN or Fox. They're pandering to their core base for advertising dollars. We all get it. However, the news, without a doubt, just seems to be so unrelentingly bad or not positive in so many ways, just divisive. It doesn't even matter what website you're on, that of course it has to play into a consumer's perception of the world around them.
100%. And that's I think that's where most of the issue lies.
It probably does.
Because like I said, gas is 7% on average. And I get if you travel a lot for work or what have you, it should have a bigger impact on you. But in general, there's people that I don't spend a lot on gas really because I live 2 miles away from the office. I don't have to drive that far that often, and I can honestly typically fill up once a month. But it still bothers me too when gas prices are higher and you have that to compare to, and not just focusing on gas, but I just think that's what it is. I don't think things are as bad. And again, this is painting in a very broad brush. There's a lot of people, I'm sure, that wages have not kept up and prices have obviously gone up. For those people, it is much worse right now. But those broad data points that we can look at for the average consumer, things are not as bad as they're saying it is. And I feel that's my opinion.
I think you're probably right. I'm probably someplace in between sort of the extremes there. I'm with most stuff, believe it or not. I don't think the economy is falling apart. However, I'm certainly not with the administration saying what's everyone complaining about.
Yeah. I'm
someplace in between. A great example is just going out to dinner. Took John and his girlfriend out to I'm not going to name the name of the restaurant, but took them out to dinner, and it's an expensive place. I've told you the story. And go there, you're going to drop, for a party of 4, you're going to drop, even without drinking too much, you're going to drop $100 a person.
And that's not even that expensive anymore for 4 people.
Well, that's the part of it. But when you're sitting there taking a look at entrees, $40 a piece, and all that stuff, there is in my estimation, that's okay if it's a good dining experience.
Sure.
And when we went there, I couldn't complain with my meal at all. My meal was delicious. Now, I don't like necessarily paying 40 plus bucks for half of a New York strip steak, which is essentially what it was, but it was delicious. Fantastic. What was problematic was the service wasn't great. And this seems to be a consistent theme. Every restaurant I've been to recently, the service isn't quite what I remember it being or what I would expect when I'm dropping $100 a head.
Yeah.
Which all of a sudden leads me to not be as happy with the overall experience as I would have, could have, or should have. And so there are a number of restaurants here in Birmingham that before the pandemic, I'm going to sound, kind of like Rockefeller, they'd bring me the check, I wouldn't even look at it because it was such a great meal, whatever it was, within reason, I was happy to pay it. Now, because of really the lack of quality service, I would say that I don't feel that same way.
Yeah.
And it does seem more expensive. I am paying more attention to the prices because the overall level of service in our service-driven economy continues to decrease, I would say, at an increasing level. That makes things seem more expensive than they are as well.
And they are. I think part of my bias in this is that I just tend to get so exhausted by talking about the same issues and complaining about the same things that I tend to want to just say, okay, at some point, it is what it is.
At some point, you got to put on your big boy pants and let's go.
Yeah, it's like if this is too expensive to do anymore, okay, we just won't do it.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's the new reality right now.
Hey, listen, you're talking to me like you talk to Hannah. I don't like it.
She's on the same page, but it's at some point it just is what it is, and complaining about something and wanting something from 4 years ago, and honestly, I think most people, given the current situation that we're in, where prices are, wages are, everything, if the trade-off was you get this, but we don't have the complete economic ruin and collapse that we would have had in 2020. I think most people, if they could see what it would look like now, or what it would have looked like in 2021, would take where we are now in a heartbeat. I think economic ruin would have been much worse without certain stimulus in the Federal Reserve that caused a lot of the inflation.
Well, I would tell you that, but it was also the government that caused the economic dislocation by shutting everything down.
Yes,
so this has all been a product of various levels of government doing something, but it's been since 1918, really, since we've had that type of
since the Federal Reserve is.
I'm talking about really since we've had that sort of pandemic to a sort of type scare, and then we reacted just overboard completely. But I think you're probably right in that regard, and I also think that probably it all depends on to whom you're talking.
Yes.
People in the upper quartile, probably, I don't like paying $13 for a 12-pack of diet soda, but I can get on with my life.
Yeah.
And that's it. You probably find most people in the upper quartile, maybe even upper two quartiles, being someplace in the middle. It's that person in the bottom quartile, and even the third quartile in terms of income earners, a household income, that would sit there and tell you that things are much worse off. So I think that you probably would sit there and go, it depends on who you talk to, the top 1%, the top 1/10 of 1%.
This has been stimulus for
just
higher rates.
Awesome. Guys out on Signal Hill Road, out in the Bay Area, going, this is the best time of my life. I haven't been like this since 1999. And that type of deal. So they're going, what's everyone complaining about? So I think it does really depend on to whom you're talking about just how bad things are. But you're probably right. I mean, and certainly the economy has grown. We're better off than we were. But that's not to say that we're maybe as awesome as the government says we are. I mean, was that 4.9% the BEA said we were fourth quarter of last year, and with 3.4 for the fourth quarter, something like that? The 1.6% number that it announced for the first quarter this year, you take a look at the data, and it's actually probably closer to 2.5%.
Yeah, and we're already at 4.2 for the second quarter estimate.
And
those two average them out
goes,
probably around 3% for the first half.
And so, to me, it doesn't seem that great, but it doesn't seem as bad as what people are making it out to be. So I'm kind of someplace in between, but I think the administration would like it if everyone were as in between as I am, as opposed to everyone saying that they're hurting.
I agree.
How much do you agree on that?
A lot.
So one last thing, and I've got to do it before I just got to take a dig on it. It remains to be seen where we are in 12 months, because perceptions can sometimes be reality.
100%.
Or lead
to it.
Lead to reality. And we're starting to see this. We kind of touched on it a few weeks ago, talking about California's minimum wage law. And this could be something that we talk about in greater detail moving forward. The changes that I think will be happening over the next, frankly, 5 to 10 years in the fast food industry. I think we're going to see pretty major upheaval as prices go up, and as, more importantly, franchisees' costs go up. we're going to start seeing a lot of these outlets probably start to struggle, if not go under, and we'll probably see a fair amount of national chains, which a lot of people have loved for a long period of time, vanish from the landscape, I would say within 3 years. And how much of that is just due to the perception, like that individual saying, I can't eat there, it's too expensive, or we're just taking that off the table, we can't afford it. We're not going to be doing these types of things, which are actually leading to the closures and the eventual bankruptcies.
Mm-hmm. I hate to hear that. Hope it's not the case.
Well, you don't eat a lot of fast food.
I don't, but good for the economy, I guess.
I guess so. All right, guys, thank you all so much for listening. We always love to hear from you all. So if you have any comments or questions, please, by all means, let us know. You can always drop us a line at tradingperspectives@oakworth.com, or you can leave us a review on the podcast outlet of your choice. As always, if you're interested in hearing more or reading more of what we have to say or how we think, you can always go to our website, oakworth.com, OAKWORTH.com. Take a look underneath the Thought Leadership tab and find links to all kinds of exciting information, including previous episodes of Trading Perspectives, previous issues of our newsletter/blog. It's a lot of listening in there, common sense, and then finally links to our quarterly analysis and magazine called Macro and Market, amongst other good things, including pieces from Matt Frazier and our advisory group, all out there, ready and free for you. With that being said, Sam, anything else to add on this exciting topic?
That's all I got.
That's all I've got today, too. Y'all take care.